I'm Tracy Green. I serve as Vice President for Strategic and Institutional Development, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you here today to sit back and absorb some stories and some inspiration as you think about what you want to accomplish with your life and your path forward. You know, I'm very, very pleased that our Yale LaunchNET program, which is funded by the Burton D. Morgan Foundation, is able to sponsor today's event. So Yale LaunchNET here on Lorain County Community College campus is a service that we provide for students as well as for alumni and community who might have an entrepreneurial idea, and they wrap their arms around that person and that idea, and to be able to take that idea to the next level and to think about not only what you want to do as a career, but maybe making entrepreneurship your own career and creating your own job. And I do want to introduce and recognize the team from Yale LaunchNET. So starting with Janice Lapina, Allison Church, Matt, Lisa, Chris. So these folks do a fabulous job of working with our community and as a service that we have here today. But today they brought you this program. And I think that that really exhibits the culture of this campus and of this community. I'm delighted to have Paris Smith here, who is the director of the Urban League for Lorain County. And she's also a graduate from Lorain County Community College and also our early college high school program, correct? So as you listen to today's program, I want you to think about what it takes to achieve your dreams and achieve your goals. And in some of those ingredients include finding individuals and finding organizations that are willing to wrap their arms around you. And I hope that when you come onto the campus of Lorain County Community College that you feel that. And as programs like Yale LaunchNET, it's our advisors, it's the culture that's here at Lorain County Community College that will help you find that path to where you want to be. And also within our community and as programs that we work with the Urban League to do, this is a community that does that. So we're really excited to have the program here this morning to offer you that opportunity to hear this inspirational message, but not to just hear it, to take that next action of what you may create. Because I'm looking around this room and you just never know that potential that today's message may have. Maybe not tomorrow or maybe not today, but in a year or 2 years from now, when you think back and you remember when that light bulb was turned on. And so we're hoping that we can be part of that with you. How many of you are interested in going to college or currently enrolled in college? Wonderful. Well, we hope that your first path and that you considered exploring that here at Lorain County Community College. This is one of the opportunities to be able to do. To introduce our speaker here this morning, I want to welcome Javon Miller, who is at Kent State, who also has a Yale LaunchNET program, very similar to what we have here at Lorain County Community College. And Javon is also a serial entrepreneur, having launched multiple enterprises, and who knows what that next big thing will be. So please enjoy. Join me in welcoming Javon.
Rodney Walker, a Chicago native, is an author, educator, and entrepreneur that travels both nationally and internationally, speaking at schools, corporations, and conferences about the importance of character, education, youth entrepreneurship, and trauma-informed mentorship aimed to uplift and support at-risk youth. Given the obstacles placed before him as a foster child, Rodney struggled academically and socially in school. In his early years of elementary school, he was placed in special education, repeated the 4th grade due to poor academic performance, and underperformed with a sub 1.5 GPA in his freshman year of high school. But through trauma-informed mentorship and education, Walker overcame these adverse experiences and redirected his path. Today, he is an award-winning entrepreneur and went on to graduate with degrees from Morehouse College and Yale University, all before the age of 25. Rodney is the best-selling author of the educational memoir titled A New Day One, Trauma, Grace, and a Young Man's Journey from Foster Care to Yale, available on Amazon and in all major bookstores nationwide. This past spring, Walker obtained his master's in educational degree from Harvard University. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Rodney Walker.
Good morning. Thank you, Javon. Thank you to the LaunchNET and Lorain County Community College for inviting me today. It's an honor, it's a pleasure. Thank you to all who came out. Thank you to the online platform also here today to allow me the opportunity to share with you both the gratitude that I have for being able to share a platform where I can share stories of resilience and hope, but also giving me the opportunity to share the power and the importance of resilience and entrepreneurial mindset in overcoming life's challenges. In this particular narrative that I'll share with you today, I do have to preface, as what was told me last time, to preface that some of the context of my story is graphic in nature. It is a true reflection of over half of inner city and rural youth who experience social emotional disparity and adverse experiences across our nation and even across the world. So while it is the true embodiment, I understand the sensitive nature of the complexity of issues and all that it can do to help to create a situation that's wildly uncomfortable, but also giving us an opportunity to reflect and comprehensively come up with a solution for ourselves and for the world to do something radically different. Because in order to overcome adverse experiences in the form of trauma or dysfunction or disadvantage or underprivilege, it takes us doing something radically different to achieve a radically different result. The context of my story, while personal, can be a personal manifestation of many different avenues that you're going through today and that we all share in some way, shape, or form. The core of my story started with the people who I knew before I knew God, which was my parents. My mom had her first child at 13 years old. She grew up in the city of Chicago, a mother who had her at 13 years old, to a grandmother who had her at 13 years old. So the cycle reached my mom seamlessly. She lost her first child in a house fire at 5 years old, was completely devastated from that experience, moved into Chicago's public housing, where she faced all of the disparities and the dysfunction that environment perpetuates. It's a concept of going through homelessness and poverty, social emotional trauma and depression. She fell victim to drug abuse, what really was the foundation and the blueprint of my story and its inception. I was placed in foster care after my father was incarcerated for selling drugs on the street. And shortly after moving into foster care, I was removed from my siblings. And from the age of 5 to 17, I've been in 12 different foster homes. Some of my experiences in foster home were modest, and some of my foster parents were compassionate. My environments were empathetic to my situation. But in most of my foster homes, they were marred with abuse, both physically, psychologically, socially, and emotionally. And at the age of 17, I ran away from my last foster home, and I was homeless on the street for several months. And while I was homeless, sleeping from friend's house to friend's house, homeless shelter to homeless shelter, I had a chance to reflect on all of the decisions that I made to perpetuate my circumstances, my environment, and how it just permeated a seamless path to this self-destruction and the disparity that followed all of my adverse decision-making. I didn't really have positive mentors or role models. I was wildly depressed, so I lost massive weight. And in a very subconscious way, indirect way, in a nonverbal way, I was asking for help, but it was help that I never got. So while my story was drastic in this way, it wasn't an exception to the rule, given the community and the environment that nurtured me over time, or the lack thereof. In the recess of my trauma, I looked inward to find that one source of hope, and it always went back to my family. So when I aged out, I didn't miss the opportunity to look for really what I consider to be the source of my happiness. I'm one of 10 children. And I can remember the elatement that I felt when I found all of my siblings one by one. It was probably the happiest experience of my life. But no sooner than I lost them, I started to lose them all over again, to the inevitable effect of post-traumatic stress disorder. My older siblings were incarcerated in and out of jail for offenses with their involvement in the street. My sisters were homeless and struggling with abuse in and out of foster care. And while I can talk about all the social systemic elements that impeded on my growth, my learning, and the development of my community, the role and the impact that drugs had as a coping mechanism, while at the same time a crippling effect in the development and the growth of my community and my life in general, I can understand the gravity that it had on the dismantling of my family. That when I found my sister for the first time after 13 years, she was barely recognizable to me. She had lost her soul trying to navigate her experiences in foster care. My mom and everything that she went through as a young teenager trying to navigate the world. My father, being enlisted in Vietnam in 1968, came home with a heroin addiction that he never recovered from. And a mom who was abused by her father sexually and physically early, and didn't have a mom who could really provide that nurturing and support to let her know that the world hadn't ended, really fell down this deep hole of lost hopelessness and depression that she never recovered from as well. So the cycle and intergenerational context of trauma truly permeated the fabric of my family, the fabric of my community, in such a way that we just went in circles time and again. And this is a part of the larger narrative of cities like the South Side of Chicago and all urban and rural centers that deal with the inevitable effect of poverty and post-traumatic stress disorder over a wide scale.
Teenagers have been charged with first-degree murder.
Another student is gunned down last night.
It's shaping up to be a bloody year for Chicago public school students. At least 20 kids have been shot so far this school year. And just this weekend, 7 more students were shot.
In the larger context of Chicago, and specifically in the area that I grew up in, which is Inglewood on the south side of Chicago, in 2008 to 2013 is responsible for 60% of the homicides during that span of time.
Last night, at least 12 people were shot. That brings the total number of weekend gun victims to 32. 6 of those people have died.
Violence in this way became a normalcy over time. My friends and family were victims of gun violence, gang violence, of the drug infestation in my community, to the point where the disparity became normal. So truly over time, this notion of normalizing the abnormal became a fact of our reality. The byproduct of that disparity and the implications it had on school, the failure of social and economic systems within my neighborhood became so much of a fact of reality that it didn't surprise anyone over time. And in my own personal way, learning that someone in my neighborhood had fell victim to violence or dropped out of school or had a hard time in and out of jail, suffering from incarceration and the social systemic elements that basically fed this narrative and this narrative over and over again, over time didn't surprise me. It became a subconscious expectation that over time, my life would materialize in this way. And ultimately, the most devastating impact of living with this over the years is that subconscious expectation becomes a reality. And then it becomes a guilt complex if you get over it. Because it's like living with the reality that you may be one mistake away from making a decision that you just can't come back from. And if you survive and succeed, you become a byproduct of having been one mistake away that you didn't make, that everybody that you loved and cared about did make. So all the while I was struggling with this notion of resilience and how do I frame my life in a way that I don't make the wrong choices while subconsciously making the wrong choices? How do I do something different while consciously trying to keep myself in the proper perspective of what to do to get ahead and succeed while subconsciously working against myself at the same time? Became the thing that drove my frustration over and over again. It's this contra narrative of being in school with teachers and mentors and counselors who would say that you're more than your situation, you're more than your adversity, you're more than the South Side of Chicago, while also having to walk back to the South Side of Chicago and to see all that I was in that. Having the compounded pressure of having to divorce myself of the emotional gravity that my community and my family had on me in such a dysfunctional way, and have to put my conscious mind and my cognitive state of well-being at the forefront to do what was best despite the way I felt, was the hardest thing to accept, the hardest challenge to accept from facilitators who didn't live in my neighborhood, who didn't go through my circumstances, who didn't have to live with the disparity day in and day out. So it became a sense of resentment that first only started with my parents. It only started with my parents. But it slowly made its way to the education system. It slowly made its way to the overall economic structure that I lived in, having this notion of taking the blame or taking the accountability or taking that notion of responsibility away from myself and my microsystem and placing it all across my environment and across the world, which further perpetuated all the self-destructive decisions that I made that landed me in the position that I was. Now you take that and everything that was working against me, and then you serve an equally competent superstructure that I had still within me, which was this concept we call hope. The hope that I'm not going to give up just yet because I have sisters in foster care who are looking at me as an example. I'm not going to give up of this concept of the possibility of a different future, the possibility that even though I'm doing so poorly, I might be able to go to college. I might be able to have a life of health and wealth and success and prosperity. I might be able to be the father that I never had in my life that I desperately needed but couldn't have because of situations and circumstances beyond my control. Compete that with the fact that I was a freshman in high school that had a 1.2 GPA and a sophomore in high school eventually that had a 1.36 GPA and went to summer school all 4 years of high school. And despite having teachers and mentors who cared, who did their very best to expose me to the reality of the world, the prosperity and the promise that was the South, that was Chicago. But every day had to walk 5 miles back south or to the west side to go to the neighborhoods that is the true embodiment of the spirit of Chicago. A Chicago that's dealing with hopelessness, homelessness, depression on a massive scale, and parents like mine who are struggling with no heat, hot water, and no real avenue for change in the near and distant future. The idea of self-destruction as a means to an end. You can be in the neighborhood like the South Side of Chicago or any community that's struggling with depression so severe that it leads to young people in particular self-destructing, whether that's through literally killing themselves or they literally engage in decisions that kill them by default, is it puts violence in this way in a very subtle fashion, because the seamless transition from hope to hopelessness happens in the subconscious level that's beyond your control. The vision that I believe most at-risk youth or at-risk individuals carry, the vision of understanding and empathizing with the reality that they live in, but also understanding that that's not normal, becomes lost over time. And if they don't have the intervention in place before they lose the difference, then ultimately we'll lose them before they even get started on a new journey. So while I was in high school, making the decisions I was making in light of the circumstances I was going through, I never lost sight of the fact, though, that my father is not here, but that's not normal. That all I wanted was to create a situation where I kept myself reminded that true normalcy is a mom who can talk to you about life principles and to nurture you to the very best version of yourself, who can talk you through that breakup that you had in high school and let you know it's not the end of the world and there's new things that are coming. And to argue and to have disagreements and to be modestly dysfunctional, but at the end of the day, that core, that microsystem that nurtures you to the very best version of yourself remains intact. And that your world is okay despite what the world around you looks like. That truly all that we ever want is a family. That's the thing that keeps us together. And when you don't have that, you self-destruct by default. If you're in a situation that's highly at risk and highly adverse to your life, that the only thing that you truly can do to create a new narrative for the future is not to aim to fix what's broken, but to create something new so that what's broken can never be allowed to happen ever again. That was a hard principle for me to accept. When you go so long without something like family and you fight so long for it over the long period of time, only to come to the epiphany or the realization that that's not going to be the answer for the long term, that truly you have to be the answer that you've been waiting for. It takes the right person, it takes the right stimulus to be able to help you understand the true calling that you have to make that happen. And even if at first it seems resentful, ultimately, it's the only way that you overcome a life of adversity and true obstacles that get in your way from where you can be in the future. So I had to adopt that and accept that. And I did that not on my own. I had one caring adult in the beginning who refused to see me fail. Early in high school, when I was making poor grades and making poor decisions, I had a mentor who was the dean of my high school, who saw more in me than I saw in myself. And for most of us, that's all it takes, is for one person to see more in us than we see in ourselves. He got me doing things cognitively and pragmatically that I've never done before, like read and study and do homework after school. There's little things that we take for granted as adults and as students. The things that over time you do mechanically without even thinking about it, to the point where you actually master the skill set and understand that your values, once they're connected to those actions, can be driven to a higher purpose. So it started with just doing things that I didn't care to do. And over time, it became a motivating factor once I saw success come as a byproduct. All throughout high school and elementary school, I didn't make good grades. But in my senior year, having the investment of one caring adult, a mentor who really took the steps, walked me through the steps that I needed, that my father didn't, that my foster care parents didn't, that's when I truly saw change that motivated me to do it on my own. And over time, I became self-motivated and self-driven to succeed. My parents had 10 children. They only went to one high school graduation in their lifetime. And all I needed was one opportunity to go to college and do the work. I applied to 13 different colleges. I was accepted on one college on academic probation in Atlanta, Georgia. And I just wanted one opportunity to do things different, get away from this microsystem that was destroying me so that I can do something radically different and reinvent the very notion of who I was. Although fast-track, this transition was not easy at all. There was a lot of sleepless nights. There was a lot of experiences that I hadn't had before that I had to learn in real time. I was not ready for college when I went to college. But resilience was instilled within me by mentors who cared enough to give their time and sacrifice their energy, and to let me know that this is not about surviving the South Side of Chicago or thriving or surviving your circumstances, but thriving in spite of the trauma. It's thriving in spite of the obstacles. In fact, it's using the obstacles as a vehicle to pursue the very best version of yourself and live the very best life that you should have been living the whole time. So I wasn't asked to go to college and just graduate. I was asked to get the life back that I was cheated of, get the vision that was stripped from me early, and reinvent what that vision looks like. And so I did that. I studied and struggled really hard in college. I created a vision board of the things and the experiences that I wanted to have and wanted to achieve, the things that I wanted to pursue. And even if I failed at getting them, I always was relentless in my pursuit of a different life, to the point where I forced the world to do one or two things, which is to destroy me or to make it conformed to the mind that I had created. And I applied to different things, internships, jobs, graduate schools, and I often failed in this application, but ultimately I succeeded because I was so relentless and resilient in getting it. This journey that I had taken to be more persevering in my struggles obviously was a 50-50 partnership, in that if I can keep the main thing, while also keeping the people that I needed to have in my life, the people that needed to be in my life, that ultimately this walk leads to a common destination for both of us. And I would say that throughout all of my experiences, both crazy and normal, which is relative in nature, having went through college, having had the opportunity to go to Yale and to travel to 12 different countries and to start a business and to be successful in all the things that I pursued, that my greatest accomplishment is that I've been able to show my mentors who refused to see me fail that their mentorship and their investment wasn't for nothing, that it was an equilateral partnership that manifested in great things over time, right? That my greatest accomplishment is that I was able to show my mom that I wasn't a mistake, that my dad's time in Vietnam wasn't for nothing, that their heroin addiction and everything that came with that dysfunctional life led to this moment today. And through everything that you accomplish, everything that you overcome, I may be able to ask you, like you're able to ask me today, what's different? And you'll probably give the same answer that I'm going to give you today, which is absolutely nothing. My parents still struggle with drug addiction. My community is still struggling with violence. My high school still produces a 50% dropout rate. Poverty and social failure still is an issue in my community, in my world. But the only thing that's changed is my mindset. And the fact that just because my world is broken around me, I don't have to be. This is the true embodiment in my mind of the entrepreneurial mindset. It's not necessarily about creating the infrastructure that serves your best interests. It's about adopting a mentality that truly reframes everything that comes in your life after the fact. This makes it easier for you to leave an infrastructure like your neighborhood or your home that may be wildly dysfunctional, and yet you can be on a completely different track apart from what you know. It's a purpose-driven mindset that refuses to be dismantled by the system and the structures around you, which I found value in. To me, there are 5 critical elements of transformation that embody this mindset. The first is that you have to own your trauma. You own your adversity and own the obstacles that's impeding on your growth and learning. It's through ownership that you really repurpose what that's about. Second, you have to forgive your parents. You have to forgive your parents for whatever it is that you think they provided or didn't provide in your life that put you in whatever situation you're in. And that was hard for me. Third is creating a vision board, an avenue that embodies visually what your life can look like a year from now, 5 or 10 years from now. And it may seem trivial in the beginning to do it, but it's very important because the more you see it, the more it becomes you. And after you do that, just so to surround yourself with people who either embody the vision that you've created for yourself, that you've committed your life to purposefully, or to surround yourself with systems and infrastructure and caring adults who refuse to see you fail in the same way that my mentors did. Because ultimately, I struggled very much so in the beginning to be the person I am today, to walk the way I walk, to talk the way I talk, to do the things that I do, to ritualize my life in the way that I've ritualized my life. But ultimately, my life is a manifestation of one caring adult who refused to see me fail. Another way I'll say that is that everybody who falls through the cracks, who don't actualize the very best version of themselves, who don't reach their full potential, or however you want to say it, they are byproducts of one caring adult, of one adult who didn't see enough in them to make the honest investment. They're a byproduct of one adult who didn't care enough. And so my journey to Harvard and Yale and everything that came with that can be mirrored with the outstanding people who are in my environment, who are in my world today, who I partner with to make a very best life and to be able to continue the vision of success and greatness that I see for myself day in and day out. And that truly is what makes the entrepreneurial pathway and the mindset and the outcomes work for you now and in the future. So thank you very much for your time.
We would like to have a question and answer period. So we know that you've heard from Rodney and his story, but do any of you have questions that you would like to ask him about your unique situation or some insight that he could perhaps give you? If you could just raise your hand, we'll come to you with a microphone. Don't be shy. Somebody has to be the first one.
Rodney, question for you. We saw your fabulous GPA your senior year. You were able to bring up, I think, a 2.4 cumulative GPA. You ended up getting to Morehouse. In my opinion, working in higher ed, so much of what we do or what we have been doing is getting kids to college. It's not necessarily then graduating. I guess my question is, what type of programs, how is Morehouse able to help you then deal with your day-to-day drama in order to go ahead and succeed?
Morehouse College, my undergraduate institution, it was very instrumental in helping me to overcome the barriers of identity that I had going into Morehouse. All I had knew before I went to Atlanta, Georgia, to Morehouse College, which is a historically black institution, all males, is what I saw on the south side of Chicago, and then very shortly what I saw in like this 1 year and a half span of a mentor and the role models that came in my life to really help to provide that critical intervention and change that I saw. But when I went to Morehouse College, it was literally, I was immersed in an environment that gave me a different image or mirrored a different image of what I could be and what I should be, so to speak. I was in an academic institution in an environment like Morehouse College with other African-American males who didn't know the South Side of Chicago. In fact, they knew the very opposite of the South Side of Chicago. They knew environments that kind of embodied what it was that I was talking about, or what I wish that I had had. And they also had the ambition and the motivation that I lacked so long while I was in Chicago. So I would say that even though I struggled in the beginning at Morehouse College, being in that environment, ultimately, it's almost like it mathematically changed me, because just being immersed in it put me in a situation where it tested my resilience, in that if that really wasn't what I was about, it either gave me the opportunity to say, I can't handle this because this is truly not who I am at my core, or it's like I could adapt to the very best part of myself to then match the environment that I was in. So Morehouse College being just this very, very wildly competitive, but yet supportive environment of academic, cultural, and social success in this way nurtured me in all the ways that I wasn't nurtured while I was growing up. And so that was extremely helpful for me to go to a historically black college like Morehouse College that gave me that stimulation on a day-to-day basis. But then also, even going back home on vacations and things like that, just being connected to new people, new adults, and new peers in the way that I think was helpful, helped me to understand that it wasn't really just about the GPA or going to college and being successful. It was more just about adopting a new pathway and a mindset that would mirror that pathway. So that's truly, I think, what I think was the most helpful. And even though in high school I was kind of given this roadmap that where college success was used as this kind of like vehicle, where it's like you graduate from high school, you got to go to college. Like that was the narrative. You know, you got to go to college. It's about going to college. You know, study for the the SAT and do well enough and have good grades and apply to college. I just have been fortunate to have been in the right institution and equipped with the right mentors who had the right message to help me understand it wasn't really about college. It was just about that self-actualization piece that I was talking about. And just that by default gave me a new inner version of what I could be, that at that point, all I needed was the resources. All I needed was like the tutor or like the guidance counselor or the career counselor and things like that to help me match what it is that this new perspective or identity that I wanted to reinvent myself by, if that makes sense. So that was the gift of my journey in a lot of different ways. And I think is why I went down the road that I went down eventually. And I think that was more helpful than just the college track that I eventually had taken over time.
Like, before you got your mentor, like, what made you, like, not drop out of school?
Say it one more time.
Before you had your mentor, like, before somebody, like, oh, my gosh. I don't know how to phrase it. Before you had your mentor, somebody wouldn't let you fail. Like, what made you not drop out of school?
Like, what made me not engage? You mean like, oh, why did I not drop out of school? So first of all, it depends on like the school system you're in. Dropping out of school is relative. It can be really relative. And what I mean by that is that you can drop out through engagement without physically dropping out. I actually was in a high school that at one period of time graduated students and all you had to have was a 1.5 GPA, which is almost the same thing as dropping out when you think about it. Because even though you don't physically drop out, and the reason why you don't drop out is because your friends are there, so you just really don't have anything else to do in the day. So you really come to school as a byproduct of your body just moves you to go to school. You wake up, so you go to school just as a fact of life. You just do it because there's nothing else to do in the day. And you know you can't be in the home because your mom won't allow you to be in the home, so you got to go somewhere, so you just go to school. Or you go as a matter of law and order. You just do that. So I didn't drop out of school for a couple different reasons. One, because again, I didn't understand, even though I didn't understand exactly why I was in high school all those years early, I always had incentive to go to school. One, because again, and this may be exceptional to my situation, but I stand to believe that many different students in inner cities deal with this, is that for most of us, a safe and structured space is school anyway. So if you're growing up in an environment like the South Side Chicago that was struggling with violence like that, gun violence, gang violence, police brutality in some situations and circumstances, alcoholics who were violent and aggressive at all hours of the day, hyper dysfunctional, right? If you're dealing with that, then the one incubator that is the safe space is school. It has the most structure, despite its dysfunction. It has the most structure. So that's what led me to go to school, I believe, all those years, even though I didn't get the most out of it. And another reason why I was incentivized to go to school is obviously because of my peers. I think that just my safe space or my comfort space was not my parents, especially not my foster parents. It was my peers. It was the one ecosystem that I think I could count on to give me that sense of social and psychological safety. Like I feel comfortable being around this space or this environment. So that to me was enough to not drop out of school. In terms of why I didn't get kicked out of school or why I wasn't expelled from school, why I didn't have parent-teacher conferences after I made like 1.2 GPA in my high school, I was just given like a slip in the program to go to community college for summer school classes over the summer. That I actually think was more systemic and structural than it was an intervention, because eventually you allowed me to go to school all this time and not really be engaged this entire time, not do homework, subscribe me to detention or in-school suspension whenever I didn't do homework and get demerits or like I did something to school. Instead of really treating the intervention like a critical intervention, you just allowed me to be reprimanded in these very subtle ways, but then allowed me to still go to school and be engaged in school at the same time. So in fact, I was a negative influence on the school, not really in the behavioral way, or like like I wasn't bullying anybody, but like not in that way. But I was negative in the context of my school made it possible for other students to say, man, he got D's and F's on his report card, and yet he's still here, and his parents are not coming and I'm not doing anything with him, it kind of like subconsciously gave permission for everybody else to do that. So I didn't drop out, of course, but in many other ways I had been lost before I even got started to do something different. And again, situations and circumstances is why I didn't drop out. And that's the only reason why I didn't drop out. And just for other people who did drop out, they had an avenue to drop out, if that makes sense, right? So for them, it wasn't that they had a mom who was at home who didn't work or who was struggling with work, who they couldn't stay home and drop out of school with. Like they had to actually go to school. Like that's my situation. Their situation is their mom worked from 7 a.m. to sometimes 10 p.m., 11 p.m. So they didn't know if they went to school or not. They just had to basically trust that they can go to school because they was managing all this stress and didn't really have the opportunity to see if he was going to school or not. Didn't have a chance to go to parent-teacher conferences. Didn't have a chance to see if he was okay. Really, all they did was work, come home, pay the bills, do groceries, and things like that. So they was afforded the opportunity to miss school and not have repercussions until the last day where the principal said he's missed too many days to come back to school, so he needs to stay home, or like him to make the decision on his own, or her to make the decision on her own to say, I'm not doing this no more. I don't see the purpose. I didn't have that. So I did it in other ways, basically. I dropped out in other ways than the physical way. And so while I didn't drop out, I found incentive to stay in school, and then I also had consequences and the structure in place that kept me from dropping out of school, if that makes sense. Yep.
Anyone else?
Were there any specific colleges that you wanted to go to before you got accepted into Yale?
Other schools I applied to? Oh yeah, when I was in my last years of college, I didn't just apply to Yale. I applied to different schools. I applied to Stanford. I applied to Northwestern. I applied to University of North Carolina. I applied to a couple state universities, and I basically got into all of them. I just chose Yale for my graduate program.
Is it on? All right. So I got two questions. Is that fine? All right. So I know you talked about how, like you were on a path, doing better and all of that. And like, was there ever a point in time you thought about, giving up? And if you did, how did you get through that mindset of wanting to give up and, wanting to quit and just drop everything you were doing? Because I know it must have been hard.
Yeah, I did. So to be honest, to make this transition from, because it's all subconscious, and we talk about this all the time, that most of our actions and decisions over time are doing things, and we don't even know what we've actually done until we think back and we think back and engage in active thinking about what we did. And then it's in that moment of active thinking about it that we think about what we did and realize and ask the question, why did we do what we just did? So that's what we call subconscious thinking and action, which is the majority of our life experience. So my subconscious thought, meaning my orientation to life without even thinking about it, was, why am I here in school? How is this benefiting me? What difference does it make? My life is this way. It's produced these results. It's not my fault. This is my thinking at the time. It's not my fault. I don't know what I'm doing to perpetuate this thing that's happening. So that was like that hopeless mindset and that victimhood mindset. So that transition from that to what I have now at an early age didn't come on its own. It really came with a lot of support and facilitation, but it really started with one key mentor who really gave me radical mentorship. And radical mentorship happens with asking the right questions in the right context, under the right situation and circumstances, and having empowered the right person to do the job. So that's what my school did. I feel like that helped me to just open up a new question about what it is that I'm doing, and giving me a chance to have a new motivation in this way. So practically what that means is that the first several years of high school was dysfunctional, just like you saw, but this last year and a half of high school was with a mentor who challenged my social and emotional notions about myself that I already committed myself to, that I was expected to not go to college. If I didn't go to college, I never had the conscious expectation to fail, but if I failed, it didn't surprise me. I think that's probably a better way of saying it. It's not like I walked around saying I'm going to fail in life or like I'm going to do this, but it's more like if I fail, as I've often failed, then yeah, it makes perfect sense. Like that was my belief system. So a pragmatic relationship with a mentor that changed that was a mentor asking me just very simple questions that nobody really asked or nobody really tried to probe me in on, which was a simple question like, well, what's the best day of your life? And then you say it, but then also, what was the worst day of your life? Oh, yeah, it was when my mom passed away. Or, oh, yeah, I went into foster care when I was 5 years old. Or I was left in the house with my uncle and things got really, really, and I told my mom about what he did when she was gone and she didn't believe me. Like these little subtle questions that give you the most exacerbated answers that truly help you understand where the beginning of the end was, quote unquote, like that. And being able to probe that question enough to understand that I had a cancer in my body. We just called this cancer trauma that informed every adverse decision and notion about myself that I had made over time. And thankfully I had a leader and a mentor who had lived experience, who can challenge those notions that I had from that one critical event, that worst day in my life or worst days in my life, that the way he can say, I can actually identify with those experiences because I can empathize because I went through something similar. And by the way, I am what I am today, and I went through what I've went and overcame what I've overcame. So why don't you think you can do the same? If there are many people actually in here today, adults, soon to be adults, who are going to do the same, why don't you think you can do that? And not just asking the question and helping me to answer the question for myself, but literally being with me day in and day out, every single day, even the weekends, to help me figure it out and to come to the right conclusion. Because if he had left me in isolation, if he had left me independent to figure it out myself, then the world would have just sent me to where it was going to send me by default, which is to jail or like to drop out of school or to not go to college. That's what just the world, not indicting the world, just by the world being this independent, unbiased, in many circumstances, microsystem. Is just going to feed me to that point. Him being with me and engaged throughout that whole time is what made me continuously ask the question over and over again until I came to a different conclusion or a different answer. And the answer you're going to come to when you got the right support in place is the answer that you want, not the answer that subconsciously you're led to. So that's where I think the beauty of his relationship with me was. It was him asking me, what is it that's really distracting me from learning, growing, and being the very best version of myself? Why can't you be the very best version of yourself despite this? And then him actually walking me through that journey of answering that question the right way day in and day out, making the sacrifice of time, energy, and money to make sure that I did that, to the point where I was introduced to the right type of thinking, the correct type of thought processes to help me to understand this is what I need to do if I want to get ahead, despite where my feelings are. Because my feelings are with my parents, my feelings are with my neighborhood, my siblings, everything that I loved and cared about, while at the same time, those same things was the same things that was destroying me at the same time. Not necessarily their fault, but it was just destroying me at the same time. So, helping me go in this direction is really what I think helped me make the change over a period of time. And the only reason why it happened so fast, because I do think that time matters, the only reason why it happened so fast is because of the nature of the relationship. Because I did have a mentor or a leader with lived experience who has such a mirroring image of what I was and what I could be, right? I often tell educators who are helping young people with challenges that you don't have to have the same experience of growing up on the south side of Chicago, growing up in poverty, growing up with racial and social inequity and all the stuff that comes with that. You don't have to. You just have to substitute it with time, energy, and money, and you got to substitute a lot of it in order to get the change that you want. But if you're somebody like me, going into the south side of Chicago, into a high school, and letting them know that I had been in foster care, I had struggled and suffered with abuse, and yet I am where I am today because of the traits of resilience that I've adopted, the mentors who refuse to see me fail, and everything that came with my growth, that it'll probably happen. The motivation and the inspiration and the practical things that you got to do to get ahead will happen faster as a result. So time is relative, but it happens faster if you have that mechanism in place that helps you to see more in yourself through the identity of someone else and the identity of a community that supports you in the ways that you need to be supported. So I think that's what made the biggest difference in my transition so fast over this particular period of time. Yep.
Do you think if you grew up in like a more of a stable area that you would have still taken the same path of success you took now, or you think, or did you have anything else planned in your mind of where you would be right now?
I think that if I had been in a stable and structured environment that had everything that I felt like I should have had or needed to be successful, like two parents in the household who worked or were business owners who just was successful in their own way, who was nurturing and who was caring, who was supportive. I had a neighborhood that was safe and economically stable. If I had all these things, I think that I would have gotten where I am faster, because I would have had a chance to use my gifts that I already had in the way that they were meant to be used, but weren't used because I had all these distractions and these stresses in place. I was diagnosed with autism when I was 5 years old, so I was in special education from first grade to my sophomore year of high school. And I had like this learning disability, but autism that I have is low on the spectrum. So I have this thing called Asperger's syndrome or something like that. It's where you struggle with socializing in the social context, whatever. But the gift that I had though in that disposition was that I could read rapid fast. Now you wonder why I didn't get ahead in English and literature and history is because I never read. And why would I read if I don't know what to eat? Like I'm not eating, just like the small things that make a difference. If I'm gifted at reading and gifted at learning, even though I have a learning disability that puts me on that, so it's like I can't really socialize that well in school, but I can read rapid fast and I can learn really, really good. But yet I had D's and F's from first grade to high school. What is that about? And it's really just about I wasn't actualizing my gift. And how can you actualize your gift when the other Maslow's hierarchy of needs is not met? Maslow's hierarchy of needs meaning that you don't have food, you don't have the proper shelter, you don't have the social and psychological safety and security and parents in a neighborhood that's making sure that you're nurtured, an environment that you can walk to and from school safely. You got to think about where you're walking, how you're walking. When you don't have those things met, how can you truly identify the gift that you have and then actualize it? You can't, because you have to again make the main thing, and that's not really yours to choose, because you can't live without eating and you can't live without heat in the wintertime or air conditioning in the summertime or going home without worrying about getting shot. You just can't. You can't do it. So it wasn't until I was able to. So I think that I would have been where I wanted to be faster, much faster. I could have probably been in college at 16 years old. I don't like something like that. But I just didn't have those barriers. And to that point, by the way, not only do I think that, but I think that the majority of young people who are growing up in environments that's so risk averse, like so adverse like that, that's the same thing. That everybody in these communities have gifts that they just cannot afford to identify and actualize, because they're just situations and circumstances in an environment that is beyond their control, that just keeps them from doing that. And it takes a radical mentorship, a radical engagement that, I hate to say it, like it forces them to suspend like these carnal needs and desires so that they can like look for what that gift is, so that they can actualize it in spite of the things that they're going through. Because that's in fact what happened to me. It was what I'm saying. I had to find a way to focus on something different than the things that I desperately needed in real time. That's the hardest thing to do, like to tell me to do homework when I hadn't eaten the day before, or like I know I gotta walk home and it's 6 p.m. and it's January and it gets nighttime at like 5 o'clock, and so shooting is about to happen probably like 6:30. And you at school trying to do homework and complete it so that you get an A in this class, but yet you got to find the ride home because you can't walk now because it's too dark. So like suspending that, like that sense of social, psychological, mental, emotional safety, just to do something radically different so that you can have a radically different outcome, is the hardest thing. But I think that's truly how you rewire your circumstances over the long haul. But again, if you don't have to worry about that, I think that gifts will be actualized for young people who going through things all across, our country, and we will be a lot farther, a lot faster if we had that support in place. But the world is the world. Some people do and some people don't. And the people that don't just have to have, like I said, that radical mindset intervention that's going to help them overlook those barriers to do something different for a different outcome. And I think it's unfortunate to say that, but just speaking as a person with lived experience through it, I think that there's benefits and advantages that you can't overlook. I'm not saying it's fair, but I'm saying there's benefits that you just can't overlook, and I'm a byproduct of that, just having to suspend all those things that I didn't have for the sake of what I wanted for the future, and ultimately being in the position that I'm in today, where I'm not resentful about it, but I'm actually grateful that I've been able to overcome and meet the right people and have the right support in place to be able to do what I'm doing today.
Hi, Rodney. My name is Kiana. And first and foremost, I have to say thank you so much for being here. Although everyone in this room has a story to tell, I'm certain that you're impacting someone with yours today, letting them know that they're not alone. My question is, though, in addition to you sharing your story, the powerful story that you have, and being the example that you wish to see, especially when you mention so much about a mentor, how are you sewing back into the communities with mentorship?
Yes, that's very important for me. Obviously, mentorship goes full circle. The only way my mentor he had this habit of saying to me very early, the only way to true happiness is serving others. And even though that sounds trivial and cliche, it really is the only way. You actualize the very best version of yourself, and you get fulfillment out of doing good for other people. So I think that truly is the hallmark of living a life worth living, honestly. And that's a message that was hard for my mentor to get to me early, though, even though he said it all the time, because I was always just wondering about how I was going to survive and what I was going to do after high school, which was a stress in and of itself. But this idea that once you get in a position where you can mentor somebody else, you mentor somebody else. His ambassadors program in high school was actually a reflection of that. His mentorship program was putting us in a position to be student leaders in our high school so that we can be, like, I guess, these role models to the juniors or the sophomores or the freshmen underneath us, because he believed that the number one influence of a peer is another peer. So a teacher can tell you to go to school and study and do this and that, but if you see your peers doing it, you'll be more motivated and inclined to do it without even thinking about it, because they're doing it. So it just gives you like this roadmap that you just don't have to even think about. You just go ahead and do it. So that was his version of youth mentorship, even, just to put us in a position to be leaders and ambassadors and give us that title so that we can assume that role. But today, I started, before I got into Harvard, a mentorship initiative with the former Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, and his work with the Emerson Collective Group, where they took something like 24 students on the south and west sides of Chicago and put them in what was like a comprehensive mentorship and economic employment program. And my role in that really was to do the same thing for them that my mentor really did for me, be the leader through lived experience, talk to them about my journey from growing up in 12 foster homes and going to college, and through trial and error, being able to be successful the way I am, just to give back like that. But also, over the summer, I engaged in a mentorship initiative with another organization that I was a part of in college, with the Institute for Responsible Citizenship. And what they do is they take African-American young men from across the country and engage them in more or less like a social program that's entrepreneurial and mentorship in nature. And every summer we spend 8 weeks just being able to teach and to mentor on that level, so that they can be successful in their own way and to learn like the principles that we learn from our experiences. So I think that's very helpful. I've been doing that since I've completed that program in 2010. So those are kind of like the ways that I give back. And in terms of like being able to have something My vision is very expansive. I do want to do a comprehensive social, emotional, and even an entrepreneurial mentorship initiative that's more comprehensive. And just me being able to conceptualize that is something I'm doing right now. I haven't really put it together, but I do mentorship in just very micro ways. And I've been doing it ever since I graduated from college. So I appreciate it.
Hi. My question is, did you ever have people who like put you down? And if you did, how did you deal with it?
Yeah, I didn't deal with it. I actually didn't deal with it at all. I think that that social failure and academic failure is actually a byproduct of not just systems failing, but it's also cultural, and it's very cultural and systemic. The biggest test of my adversity actually didn't even come from just my foster parents and my teachers. It actually came from my foster siblings who I was in these homes with, and it also came from my peers in school. So bullying actually is a byproduct of that. Even it's an experience of being in a situation where you already are coming into a system with low self-esteem and low self-confidence. And by default, you just have people who truly identify that in somebody. And for whatever reason, there are people who get stimulated from identifying. It's like they're a magnet. They identify people who have low self-esteem, low self-worth, low self-confidence, and it almost like it feeds them to be in a situation where they're a perpetrator against those type of individuals. So me being in a school system where I was told as someone who was struggling with autism in special education, like I had to leave the main classroom to go in the separate classroom whenever this class was starting because I had to have a special instruction. Or I was in foster homes with foster siblings who actually were their parents were their parents by birthright, but I was the foster child in the foster home, whatever. These very subtle exchanges during disagreements fed that, what I'm talking about, where people would put me down for that and stigmatize me in many different ways. I didn't necessarily, it depends on what you mean by overcome. And so if you mean overcome, meaning that I took these notions of what I was told I was with a grain of salt and said, I'm really not that. I'm actually something different. I'm greater. I'm better. I didn't do that. I didn't have no one in my circle at a point in time that actually even gave me an adverse vision of what I could be or what I could do. Even being in therapy and counseling in foster care, right, was a form of what that is, the putting down effect. The same impact that you have from bullying was actually the same impact that I had from counseling and therapy, because by default what it did was make me think I must have done something, or I must be in such a way that requires counseling and therapy. So I must not be normal. So it actually did the opposite of what it was supposed to do. So I did not fare well with all those things. I wasn't able to get over it again, which is why I struggle with this notion of subscribing my success to my own efforts, which I know I worked hard, and I challenged myself in so many different ways to overcome these notions and this esteem issues that I've had over time. Subscribing to myself and my efforts and to the people who came into my life at the most critical time they could have came into my life to give me different notions of what I could be and what I could have, what I could do, what I could achieve, what I was worth, and things like that. I had that in the most radical way. And to be honest with you, I think that when you're talking to a young person, like students who's struggling with self-esteem, self-worth, always being put down, you can't just give them a counselor or just the local, the gym teacher who's just an inspiration in the neighborhood, just to give them notions of what success is and what they can be. You need a radical form of mentorship that if it's not coming from your parents who are with you every single day, it has to come from somebody who's with you every single day and more consistently. So I had that in the person who stayed with us, with me and other students from the time we got into school to the time we left at 6 p.m., 7 p.m. It was truly transformational. It was so radical that, again, I talk about this often. It was so radical that he got fired because he wasn't even doing his job. He wasn't doing the job of suspending kids, sending them to detention. This is what a dean does in high school. Send you to detention, in-school suspension, reprimand you, write you up, stuff like that. He wasn't even doing that. He was spending more time trying to prove to you your self-worth by modeling what it means to have self-worth and modeling what it means to overcome adversity and do all these things than doing his actual job, which is part of the reason why he got fired. But if you don't have that radical form of mentorship and someone who's going to take it there, you probably won't have that kind of intervention in your life unless it's coming from somebody who don't have those kind of pressures in the school system. And I had that, and that's what kind of helped me to walk the step in a different direction, to say like, I actually do have a learning disability, but it's actually to my advantage. I grew up in foster care, but I can still go to college and graduate. My mom's struggling with drug addiction, but I don't have it to be a byproduct or a victim of drug abuse. My siblings are incarcerated, struggling with jail and things like that, and it's expected that I'm going to do the same thing when I get of age, right? I'm 11, 12 years old, so like when I get 13 and 14, when I start when I go from 5'5" to 5'8" or 6 feet, it's not just like the hormonal change, it's your social change, your emotional change. You form your own identity, right? You become a teenager, so you get more aggressive, more competitive, more prideful, more egotistic, right? These things happen. So like parents not telling you anything, you actually form your own opinions. Like it was expected that way. His older brothers actually went down this road, so of course he's by default going to do that because this is who he's around every day. I had a mentor who literally changed the scope of what I thought about myself in that regard. I never thought of myself as a bully or somebody who was had a disposition to that or somebody who was antagonistic or would put you down. I never was like that. But yet I always thought the outcome was going to be the same by other factors that was involved. So yeah, I was completely susceptible to that. And all it took is one person to help me question that. And if you don't have that one person that helps you question whether you're worth it or not, and you struggle with that and always lose the fight, then that's the worst position to be in. And I can sit up here today and say, as a byproduct of trauma and having been a byproduct of low self-esteem and low self-worth at a period of time, that you're absolutely worth it and that you can overcome whatever psychological or social barrier you're going through. I can say that here today. I'd make it a point as a mentor today to be drilling that in your head like every single day, every hour of the day, every chance I get, even if it comes at the expense of my job, because I know you're not going to get over it otherwise if you're not getting it from nowhere else. It's not a one-time like you're worth it or why don't you think it is. It's like a you're worth it, why don't you think you are? Why do you think I'm spending so much time with you? If I didn't believe it, why am I spending so much time with you? Why am I going the extra mile to make sure that you know that your mom who told you you're not college material, that she's wrong about that? If I actually believe that she's wrong about that, I'm giving you the space by example, like to show you different. So subconsciously, I'm going to believe it. But if you're not there every day, if you're not really like giving me that affirmation every day, it makes sense that mathematically, I'm going to go in the same direction that the world has been pulling me in all this time. Like the world tells me I'm nothing. I've been told I've been nothing. No one's spending time with me. No one's really giving me the attention that I need. So yeah, when I drop out, when I drop out and when I don't make it to college, even though I've applied, or when I get into that one fight that I can't take back and get arrested for it, or when I make that one decision that I get arrested for, I'm going to be devastated. But then after being devastated and thinking about it for a couple of days, I'm going to say, oh yeah, I saw this when I was 15 years old. I saw this when I was 13. I kind of saw this coming. So that to me is why I struggle when it comes to putting in the work and reaffirming yourself, because you need to do that, and having the right people around you who's going to do that the same thing and show you by example that you have that same self-worth and you have that same, you have that esteem to be successful. And I have both. Got one right here.
Okay, so first I want to acknowledge how thankful I am to sit here today to be able to listen to your story about how you had a rough youth life and then you came up and had so many good achievements. But my question is, would you characterize your achievements as greater than somebody's who did not have a rough youth life but is still at the place that you are today?
I would, and that's a good question. I would categorize it as, I will categorize my success, practical success, meaning from foster care to Harvard, as an exception to the rule. I would categorize the trajectory as something that can be the rule and not the exception. And let me tell you what I mean by that. So I'm just an ambassador for this trajectory that I'm talking about. I believe it or not, I don't like, while I appreciate and I'm grateful for the opportunity to have went to Yale and Harvard and Morehouse College and had a chance to be an entrepreneur, be an author and things like that, while I appreciate that and I'm grateful for that and and I do what I do today, and that is truly, in a lot of people's eyes, successful in spite of what I came from, the details are the exception, but the trajectory shouldn't be the exception. And that's what I have a problem with, and I think that a lot of educators today should have a problem with. You don't really want to say to a kid who's on the south side of Chicago or any situation where they're struggling that you need to go to Harvard. It's not about Harvard. It's not even about college per se as a specific. What it is it's about doing something radically different that's going to give you a radically different outcome from what you know. And that by default looks like college. It doesn't look, Harvard is just a detail. It's college, but it's just Harvard, right? It's like it's college, but it's Harvard University, which is just college. So it's an appetite that people like. But the true success in my journey is not the Harvard or the Morehouse piece per se, but it's more, or even the college piece. The true success is like, he grew up in foster, and I'm just going to use everybody's situation in some way, shape, or form. It's like he grew up in foster care, his parents struggling with drug addiction, homeless, brothers and sisters in and out of jail, struggle with sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, poverty, made all these mistakes, and yet he found a way to say primitively, like at the core, that unless I do something radically different in the positive direction, there's no way that my life is not going to be the same as everybody else who I've known who had this type of profile. There's no other way. So by default, when I say, what does radical mean? My conclusion was, I need to go to college. I need to actually do what I need to do now. Purpose-driven learning now. This is purpose-driven learning. So now it's like, okay, I actually have to work with these people who've been trying to help me all this time to learn the skills that I need to learn to get out of here, to learn what I need to learn to be successful. And by the way, that looks like college, because I want to be a lawyer so I can be a defense attorney, so that my same brothers who went to jail and was incarcerated because they didn't have legal defense, now I can be a lawyer for somebody who's like that. I need to be a lawyer. So I actually need to get good grades in high school right now so that I can get to the best college to be a political science major, so that I can then do really, really good in political science, so that I can learn the law, so that I can then go to law school, one of the top law schools if I'm fortunate enough to get into a top law school, so that I can learn the law even further, get certified so that I can become a lawyer, so that my brother who's probably going to be suffering from this 10 years from now can have a legal defense like me, who I don't have to so I can make sure that they don't end up in the same situation my brother ended up in, right? It's purposeful. That to me leads to or feeds the trajectory of, I need to go to college. So it's not like, wow, he went to college from what he went through. That's really like, he chose to do something radically different from the adversity that he experienced, and this is just what it looked like. That's my success. What looks good to everybody actually is just that I went to Harvard, and I went to Yale, and I went to Morehouse, and I became an entrepreneur, I became an author, and I do what I do today. But it could have looked like anything else. And so what we're really talking about is trying to unnormalize this systemic notion that college is the have-all, end-all, be-all, because college is just a pragmatic step in the right direction. We're trying to actually reframe it to say college is important, but not because we're just trying to make sure you have a degree, but it's important because if you want to break the cycle of intergenerational trauma and adversity that has been over your life all this time that you have subconsciously led yourself to, you need to do something radically different. You need to be skilled. You need to be educated to do something radically different, to be the change that you wish to have seen in the world. And how can you do that if you don't learn? How can you do that if you don't put yourself in a formal system or infrastructure where you can learn to the very best parts of all these skills that you need to be something different? That's what college does. It's a formal education system that puts you in the space and place in time to learn the way you need to learn to be radically different and do radically different from what you know. Now, entrepreneurs, some of them don't go to college. They take different alternatives and routes. But those who really want to be an example that they need it, like the lawyer, like I was telling you, for like your brother who went to prison, who didn't have a defense attorney, or the advocate for your sister or your brother or whoever who experienced abuse, who didn't have that advocate because they didn't have somebody who understood what you needed in real time, then you need to be that and not wait for somebody else to be that. And to be that, you need to adopt the skill sets, and to learn the skill sets, you have to be in the system that helps you do it. And that's what college really does. So my mentors was just proud that I graduated from college, but they were more proud that I adopted the mindset that I adopted that led me to college. And so I think that I'm an exception to the rule in that I went to Harvard, but I'm not an exception to the rule in that I had the right mentorship initiative and engagement that led me to the success story that I am today. And that doesn't look like Harvard. It just looks like I chose to not do the same thing my father did. And he justified doing what he did. I just chose not to do what he did. I chose not to do what my mom did. I chose not to do what, like I said before earlier, I chose not to do what the gods did before I knew the word God, so to speak. Like before you knew what Christianity or Islam, whatever, before you knew faith mechanism, faith notion, you knew your parents. So by default, that's what you're going to do. So my true success is, like I said, this doesn't work. What you guys have done, in spite of what you went through, doesn't work. I need to do something different if I want a different outcome. And that's the true beauty and success of my mentorship over time. Yeah.
When you went to college, did you know what you want to do, like what you wanted to do? And
No,
like,
that was
I'm sorry. And like, what major did you go for?
Yeah, I'll answer that real quick. I was a philosophy major. I did not know what I wanted to do, and I talk about this all the time. I went to college first because I was told to go to college. So back to what I was saying, like, I went to college because I was told by my teachers before I met my mentor, the only way you're going to get out of the South Side of Chicago is to go to college. So I never was told about a major. I wasn't never told about a college advisor, a college advisor in college who like walks you through the curriculum and the lesson plans and stuff like that. I was in my freshman year at Morehouse, and I was taking classes that I didn't even know, not what the significance of this was, but why does this make sense to take this class? So I took like a lot of ancient philosophy classes, you know, Aristotle and St. Augustine and Descartes and Plato and stuff like that. And I'm just like, man, I don't know what I want to be, but I just don't know what this is. So I went to college, and I was like, I don't know what this stuff is, but I know philosophy sounds like a really cool subject to take. So I took it, and I was frustrated, and I hated it. And then I was like, I don't know what I'm doing this for. So that was my journey. And then again, over time, through this reaffirmation and this talking with my mentors about the things that I could do and could be in college, they put me on the track to understand, like, you need to be developing skill sets while you're here that's going to prepare you for what you want to be after school. So I had to really think critically about what I wanted to be. So I was on the track to be a lawyer, and so lawyer or go to law school. So most law school candidates do political science, English, philosophy, social studies in some respects. So I said, okay, well, I know that I have a good chance that I want to take the LSAT my junior year of college. So let me just go ahead and prepare and take the classes that I need to graduate to put myself in that position to do that. So that's what the philosophy major came from, and applying to different schools. Ultimately, I changed my mind like my sophomore year and decided that I wanted to go into like business administration. So I changed from philosophy to philosophy and business administration, and then applied to business school. And then I obviously got into Yale's MBA school and the divinity school. So learning how to pray for you and take your money at the same time. Once I actually did that and put myself in a position to work in the business world through investment banking, which is the route that I chose, then it became more evident, you know, why I went to school and like what that journey was like. But in the beginning, I absolutely did not understand. I wish that I had I think that if I had learned what I had learned in my freshman year of college, in my freshman year of high school, that I think that it would have been more purposeful. My road in college would have been a lot more purposeful in what I wanted to take and what I wanted to do. But no, I didn't know, but I navigated it through continuously thinking about what I wanted to be while I was in college.
Hi. My question for you is, what advice do you have for people who are trying to start their own business or follow their dreams while dealing with not having financial resources to do so, but also the fact of society trying to condition the fact of like you have to work a 9-to-5 job in order to make it, and so on and so forth?
Was your question like something like that? I don't know if it was. Okay, because this is so funny. I have one of my mentors with me here today, Gary Schoeniger, who I met through the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program and initiative, and I met him when I was at Morehouse College. I had taken an entrepreneurship class in high school called the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, or NIFTY. It was a program that taught students the skills of entrepreneurship and how to, how to own and operate or start a small business. So teach you about these principles. So with that experience, I would say the first thing that I did to learn how to start a business and to combat the notions of you need to get a 9-to-5 job and really get acclimated to this superstructure in American society that says you need to prepare yourself for a 9-to-5 job by virtue of going to college, getting educated, and then building up your resume and going. Which again, if you can put it in any different way, it sounds bad or it can sound good depending on how you do it. But the first thing I absolutely did was create a business plan, and I learned how to create a business plan through this program, through NIFTY. By creating the business plan, what I did by default is learn all the elements of business development and creation. And then by default, ask myself questions like, why does this make sense? And so by default, I adopted more or less an entrepreneurial mindset. So just being engaged in like learning about business and entrepreneurship put me in a position to have to orient myself in a different way. Because the more I learned, the more I couldn't unlearn. And the more I invested my time and energy to learn about it, the more it became a part of me. So I did a business plan. I focused on something that I love to do, something that I did seamlessly and effortlessly with the least amount of effort over the shortest period of time, with stuff that I did without even thinking about it. And those was two things while I was growing up. It was basketball and like photography and video production. I was like, those things I did without no one having to gauge me in doing it, having to motivate me to do it. So my business teacher said, what if you can create a business out of photography? So that's exactly what I did. I just did a business plan, bought another camera and put the systems in place, and I did business for free for about 3 months, created all these like fake aliases, like a business accountant, an administrator, an HR person, whatever. But that was all me. And just did it over email, so you didn't know it was me. You just thought it was somebody else, but it was really me on the other end of the email chain. And I was doing business for free for the first like couple months, and then I did a website, and then like I put stuff on the website, and it was like, man, he really has like all these different he did all these different things. And then I started getting paid to do them, and I started like really small. So that appetite for entrepreneurship was I was doing this as early as 16, 17 years old. So I was really just making this money very early and learning about the business of entrepreneurship very early, to the point where when I got to college, I continued to do it, and it was really exciting and stuff like that. And with my business development came hand in hand with the entrepreneurial mindset. I was just engaging in the business of what I learned in school. I was just engaging in it without even knowing really what it was. And then over time, I became more, the more I did it, the more I started to think innovatively about what it was and how to do it different and how to do it better. And that, to me, is the entrepreneurial mindset, is when you stop taking things as a fact of reality and start asking the questions about how you can do things better, do things more effectively and efficiently, and then how you can do it in the way that produces the most good. So that's what I did from that. And that's kind of how I got connected to all these different people and institutions, organizations, and Gary, obviously. So that's the first thing I did. Create a business plan, learn about the elements of of business and entrepreneurship. And, organizations like the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative does a good job with that. And then also to combat this whole idea that 9-to-5 jobs are kind of like the fact of your reality, which I want to put that in the proper context. And I actually was talking about this not too long ago. Because of the advent of social media and you see everything, so you know what can be done and how it can be done, it's no longer, we're moving towards a situation where it's no longer acceptable to look at yourself as an employee and to look at your boss as an employer. The world is now so transparent that you can't do it like that anymore. So now it serves in everybody's best interest that even if you have a job where you're getting a W-2 or whatever, you have to look at it more like as a strategic partnership or a partnership, even no matter how it's oriented. So part of an entrepreneurial mindset is that if you're working a 9-to-5 job or you're moving towards that really what it is this company or this person is paying for what you have and you're getting from them what they have. And I think in that relationship, there's value in you as a person, and then there's value in this person or this business as an entity or an institution. And so I think that's how you get away from this notion of, I need to kind of combat this notion of I'm working for somebody else. I'll often say that you can be two things in life, which is a business owner, or you can be an owner in the business. And that's absolutely true in today's day. It's more important to have the entrepreneurial mindset than just to be an entrepreneur purely by virtue of what it means. Somebody who starts a business and has 1,000 employees, you can have that and not be an entrepreneur, and it falls apart. But the true value in entrepreneurship is having the mindset that gives you the opportunity to be innovative, think creative, think outside the box, and build the very best version of your life, given all these things that you know, to be an avid learner and to value learning in a way that puts you in the best positions to optimize your experience. So I think that's the best first place to truly get involved and to learn about entrepreneurship in the radical way, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
just want to touch with Gary and then close out.
Okay, so I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story. But I do have a question. Knowing where you have been, where you have come, and I really appreciate the value of you not blaming and knowing that and not playing victim, because I think so many of us do that, and that really can put us in a rut. What advice would you give, knowing what you know, what advice would you give your 5-year-old self?
Yeah, despite, that's such an interesting question. So the advice I would give my 5-year-old self, so despite not having a lot of the things that I felt I should have had, or the things that I should have had to be, to make my roads to success easier or more even acceptable, I found a way to forgive my parents despite what they did and didn't do. And I would have told myself, my 5-year-old self, that now, even though I learned it later and went through all the trouble before I learned it from the right person. I would have told them that, no matter what happens, no matter how difficult life gets, and it really could get difficult past this point, you got to find a way to forgive your parents. And I stress this point so much because you could say it in so many different ways. You could say actually stress the perpetrator, I guess, which is somebody or something that has actually impeded on your learning or have caused you the most harm, somebody that you're angry at or resentful for. But for most of us, it's our parents, either directly or indirectly. Because as a 5-year-old, I don't care who I was abused by in foster care, it always went back to where were my parents. It's like that's what my pathology was. Like, where the hell were my parents? And then to amplify that feeling of resentment and anger, once I aged out of foster care, the worst thing that I came back to was my parents together. So they were already together when I aged out. I was 17 and I ran away. I was homeless for a couple months. I aged out at 18 and did the independent thing, had a chance to do it. And I said, I don't want to do that. I just want to find my parents and go back to my parents. I was expecting to find my dad in jail and my mom on the south or the west side of Chicago somewhere. And I show up at their doorstep and they both are together. So still struggling with what they're struggling with, but found a way to struggle together, despite having 10 kids all spread out throughout the city who they practically had no relationship with. So that had a very adverse effect on my life. I just only stand to believe that most young people who self-destruct early, whether it's them using drugs or making poor decisions that land them in jail, or even practically like killing themselves, is a direct or indirect byproduct of their parents. So I needed somebody at 5 years old to say to me, like, this is about to get really, really hard. And whatever you do, if you can have it in you, forgive your parents. And that would have made a world of difference to me in terms of even trying to attempt to do something different while I was growing up, despite the decisions that I made. There are also kids, by the way, and I was one of them, who was afraid to confront my parents later, because my parents had this type of they have this really dominant personality where they can either they were going to give me the answers that I didn't like or didn't want, which would make me angrier, or they would say something that they can't take back. So I never wanted to take a conversation there. So I never even had that. I never had the courage to even do that. And so that's why I think was the most pivotal thing that I think somebody could have really helped me through when I was younger. It's like, you know, you're going to be going through a rocky situation, circumstances. You know, try to do these things, find the right people, stay motivated, stay inspired, know you're worth it, stuff like that. But make sure you include forgiving your parents, because you can truly not embody resilience if you don't have forgiveness. And I really actually don't mean forgiveness by sentiment. I don't mean forgiveness as an emotional concept. I also really mean forgiveness as a cognitive concept. You have to choose to forgive. You can actually be so resentful at somebody that your words don't actually match up to your actions, but you can also criminalize yourself by not even committing to something. And for me, it's like every day I would wake up sometimes and I'd just be angry, and I knew it was because of my parents. But before I actually convicted myself to letting that go, before I actually felt the letting go, I couldn't move forward in a productive way. So I actually convicted myself, like, I don't care how long this takes for me to feel it. Today, I will forgive my parents and just let that go, because there's nothing I can do about it. And everybody has a story to tell. So I have to be truly empathetic about that and just choose to forgive my parents despite what they did and didn't do. So, yeah.
Rodney, I just want to thank you again. Your story's powerful, and thank you for your friendship and your generosity of the spirit of your message. But, you know, the question that's rattling around in my head listening to your story is it seems quite clear to me that a mentor, a radical mentor, was kind of the linchpin of the whole thing. I mean, you had hope, you were hanging on, but this radical mentor came into your life somewhat serendipitously, right? You kind of ran into McGrone. That sort of happened accidentally. It was sort of an accidental thing. So my question is, like, what would you say that there's kids in this audience that are kind of right in that kind of middle space that you were occupying right there, right? Mm-hmm. Like, how do you go find, like, how do you take the randomness out of that? What advice would you have somebody to go find that radical mentor? How do you do that?
Right, so that's actually a really, really good point. Mentorship is a tug and pull relationship. And just like a normal relationship, sometimes you find that somebody is giving more to the relationship than the other person. If you have been like in a relationship with somebody who felt like you were doing more than you were supposed to or you have to, and then they weren't reciprocating it the same way, or vice versa, that's just, to be honest with you, like you can argue that that's an inevitable effect of the relationship dynamic that you can have with somebody, no matter who it is. your mom is doing more for you than you're doing for your mom, or vice versa. You're doing more for your mom than she's doing for you. You're doing more for your dad or whatever, or he's not doing anything at all, or he's doing all the way everything, right? Like spoiled kids versus overly disciplined kids, or whatever. Like it's just this balance that's just a really, really bad tug and pull. The mentorship relationship was the same thing for me. Either I was going to come to him actively, proactively, aggressively, assertively, like I was not going to leave this world without having that one person who was going to give me what I needed to get ahead in a different way, or he was going to do that, or she was going to do that in the opposite direction. It just so happened in my situation, he did that. I would argue that if you want to take the randomness out of it entirely as a person who's in my position or something like that, then you take on the role that he kind of took on in my place. And I think that you just have to trust that the relationship will balance out over time. So practically what I mean by that is that, you know, our relationship started in detention. I went to detention for either one of three reasons. One, because I missed too many days of school, and I had a demerit system in my high school. So if you missed too many days of school or came tardy too many days of school, you had in-school detention. After a certain period, you had in-school suspension. After a certain period of time, you had like a parent conference or whatever like that. So I was either suspended for that. I was suspended for generally like not doing my assignments or being engaged in class, like doing the homework assignments, things like that. We had a system for that. So if you went too many days without doing your assignments, you would get docked like points, and then you would get detention. So for one reason or another, I always had a chance to see him. Against my will. So in those first sessions in detention, it wasn't like, you know, do the homework you didn't do before, or we're gonna, you know, just sit here and be quiet for the next hour and a half until it's time to go, or something like that. It was really proactive. It was constructive. It wasn't like the dean of the high school who sat behind the desk in the detention room working on his computer. It was like the dean of students who brought like pizza and fried chicken and like all that kind of stuff in detention. Almost like, well, what is this? So it became more like a, man, I thought I was in detention. I don't know where I'm at right now. And so you saw like sometimes detention students who were there because they did something wrong actually show up because they wanted to. And so, and for one reason or another, right, like the food, or it's because we was doing something kind of constructive around some type of activity some type of activity that was engaging before we even got to talking about issues, So this is my idea of him being radical in one respect, but paying attention in another respect, right? It's not about the missed school periods or the tardiness or like the delay, like, you know, it's nothing about really that. It's the wounds that you cannot see. So in order to do that, you gotta have a reel with a worm at the end to get a fish. So it's like you gotta do something to get that engagement at the forefront. And that's only gonna happen in one of two ways. You bring me food that I'm not gonna get when I go home, that I have to struggle with when I go home, or something that I'm needing that I'm not getting. And then, or I tell you, hey, I just need about 5, 10, 15 minutes of your time to just talk about something that I'm struggling with. I need to find a way to do this differently. And, you know, I'm just looking for people who can really show me the right way, because where I'm at right now, I'm in a bad place. Every time I make a decision, it seems like I'm getting negative results. And I don't know what I'm doing, but maybe you in your position can tell me what I can do differently and like walk me through it and just allow me the space to be receptive to what you're saying, and allow me to be accountable to you to do it. That's the tug and pull that has to happen. So for me, and understandably for a lot of us, it couldn't have been that way. It had to have been the opposite way. So what he did was create this whole system and complement it with his time and space and energy to accommodate us and meet us where we were. That's the term, meeting us where we were. Derek didn't show up to detention, or he didn't show up to session one day. Okay, guys, we're gonna need to delay this for about like 10 minutes. So he go to the class, go outside of the school and find Derek walking home where he shouldn't be walking home. Hey man, what's going on? I thought we were looking for you. Like we all waiting for you to come to the session. I didn't even know I didn't know anybody was waiting on me. So okay, I'm gonna go back in the session. I didn't even know y'all knew I was there. Like I didn't know that I was even considered to be a part of this thing. So now I know that you guys actually value me being there, so subconsciously I'm just going to make sure I show up. So these small little things over a period of time made that buy-in more possible, to where it was like him doing this and we were right here, to like balancing itself out over time. So the balance happened not by virtue of him doing more because it just is politically correct to do more, but he did more by virtue of balancing the relationship. If you know, it's so simple to me, because it's like the more time you spend with somebody, by default you're going to build a relationship with them. And whether you like it or not, the relationship is going to flourish in one way or another. So him just doing that so meticulously is what made us say, you know what, I think now I trust you enough to be able to heed like your counsel and take criticism from you and take your advice and actually follow up on it. And even when I don't follow up on it, I know I'm going to hear from you about it. Like, what is it? It's like, why didn't you? And you can do that now because you spent so much time and invested so much energy and money that now I feel like I owe you an answer. I want to give you an answer because I know what you're doing. So that to me, even though it was random because I was in that school at that time and he just happened to be the dean of the students at that school at that time, when he could have been at any other school, I met him and developed this kind of relationship and engaged with him in this way that led me to this outcome because of his commitment and sacrifice. If to take the randomness out of it, it's literally like students in the audience saying, I need to do my research, look around to see the people who inspire me in this room are people who are really like on a track that I see myself wanting to be on in my neighborhood, in my community, in my city, in my school, and just make it a point to actively pursue their mentorship and do the same thing. Like, I just want like, an hour of your time on the weekend in the office, just build a rapport. And when you think about like all the students who really want to do that with their time when they could be doing other things, there's not a lot of students who want to do that with their time. So on the one hand, I'm empathetic to students who don't do that, but at the same time, I know what it takes now, looking back, to get ahead. So I had the luxury of somebody who met me all the way down at the bottom versus me having to come halfway, so I know. But I think that to proactively get ahead, you got to be intentional about the relationship with somebody who mirrors what you want to be going forward. It's just that's the only way you can take the randomness out of it. Otherwise, you're going to be playing the lottery system, the lottery of you might meet somebody like that and you might become what you want to be, or you won't meet somebody like that and you won't become what you want to be. And how often do people win the lottery? Now, how many people play the lottery, and then how often do people win it? The people who win it get a profile, like me, by the way. I'm guilty of this. I'm owning it. So, like me, who won the lottery, got $150 million, and I'm showing you the check, and I'm saying you could be this too, right? So you play it. So the government gets about $3 billion, and they give away like $200 million or something like that. So I serve in that capacity when it comes to the building the mentor relationship. I didn't do really a lot to deserve what I got from an engagement standpoint. So I just think that to just eliminate the lottery system, be an entrepreneur, like that concept, like go after the engagement and be proactive about pursuing it to make sure that you are more than likely guaranteed to get the outcome that you want. So yeah, that's it.
On behalf of everyone at Yale, LaunchNET, and Lorain County Community College, we want to thank you for your time today. We hope that your message resonated. Rodney's message definitely resonated with me. I'm sure it resonated with all of you. Thank you for coming to our campus if you're not actually at our campus very often. And if you do come to campus, we hope we will find mentors for you and hope to inspire you in the same way that education inspired Rodney. Thank you again for your time today, and have a good day.
I'd also like to say thank you to all the educators who brought your students in here too.